All right, we've got a very cool video for you today. I'm going to be walking you through Cubase Pro 12's newest feature called MIDI Remote. And I'm going to be setting this up with Maschine. I'm using a Maschine Plus, but it's the same thing for a Maschine. And actually, a lot of this stuff will apply to a Maschine Micro as well. So make sure you stay tuned. It'll also apply to a Maschine Mark II. So if you have one of those lying around, you can use it to do a lot of the stuff I'm doing here today. You can also watch this video if you're going to be setting it up with anything else. So if you want to use MIDI Remote with any other controller and you really want to know how a lot of this functionality works, check this video out. Now, I would not be sitting here giving you this video and, well, filming it for the second time actually, if it wasn't for the help of a really good friend of mine. So early in my YouTube days, I made a friend with Nico5. A lot of you may know him from the forums. The two of us have spent about 12 hours this week trying to sort this all out in the best way possible. And this guy is a genius in musical ways and in programming ways. And that's why he's been so helpful to so many people on the forum. So if Nico's helped you out in the past, please chime in on the comments. Let him know how much you appreciate him. I'll figure out a way to share what I'm doing here, these templates with you. And the idea, though, is for you to go and make your own template, because once you start digging into this and understand some of the principles, you'll be able to do this yourself and be able to set up key commands and functions to your machine that will apply to the way you work, because some of you work totally different from me. I'm not getting paid to make this video, but I am getting the hardware and the software for free from Steinberg and from Native Instruments. So that is just like paid promotion to me. That's why I put paid promotion at the beginning of the video. So right now, if you look at my machine, I've got things labeled up top. I'm going to show you how to do all that kind of stuff. And having that functionality, as well as having this MIDI remote thing in your screen to remind you of all of the key commands you've got set up, is a beautiful thing. Okay, so what you're looking at right here is my final Maschine Plus template. I am going to walk you through the steps of setting this up. So we'll start from scratch. And the thing that makes this setup so powerful is the fact that we have the controller editor from Native Instruments, where we can go and choose all sorts of functionality with these knobs and buttons. So I am going to make a new template right here. I'm just going to click New Template, and that's going to reset everything so it'll look just like yours does. I'll put some chapters in the description so you can skip ahead certain parts that might not apply to you. We might as well start on the Cubase side of things. You can go up to Studio and go MIDI Remote Manager, and then here you're going to click on Scripts. I'm going to click Add Surface, and then this thing pops up down below in the MIDI Remote lower zone. So lower zone is this button right here. We are going to go Input Port and Output Port. We're going to change that to your device. For Maschine setup, you want to choose Maschine Plus Virtual or Maschine Virtual, and that's going to take all the MIDI information from our machine right here. Next, we're going to choose Native Instruments. We'll call it Maschine Plus, and then I'm going to hit Next arrow to the right. And here is where you're going to start populating the screen with the buttons of your controller. And if you have something like an Arturia keystep, they've actually made scripts for it. So you look at Keylab Essential 49, you can see the keys, you can see the sliders and the buttons. So of course for the machine, we don't have anything like that, so we're making our own. So before we get into the Cubase stuff, I want to go over to the controller editor for the machine. When you start with a blank template, as I did right here, if you are not seeing Machine's controller mode, you just have to press the Shift Channel button, and that will pop up controller mode. It's a little different if you're on Maschine Plus. You actually have to go into settings and turn it to controller mode. Kind of bland, kind of boring. We got a bunch of CC buttons at the top, and the colors aren't that exciting. With controller editor, we can go and change colors on the screen stuff, and we can actually change colors of LEDs as well. So what we're going to do first off is we're going to take all of the buttons, and we can just draw a box around them like this. Select all the buttons, and we are going to start messing around with some of the behind the scenes stuff, because these buttons are all set to be control change information, which is what we want, but they're all in a mode called toggle, and we don't want that. What Nico and I found out was that setting these all to gate was the best way to do this. And then if there's any buttons that need to toggle, like a solo button where you click the solo button and it solos, and then you click the solo button again and it unsolos, we want to do that kind of toggling in Cubase with the MIDI Remote script. So set all of your buttons to gate. And then we're going to do something a little bit different to these pads. One of the things with Maschine is that they've got undo, redo, step undo, quantize, etc. from these pads right here if you press Shift. We're not going to press Shift. What we're going to do instead is we're going to use those terms to still be undo, redo, etc. But we're not going to have to press shift. We're just going to put it to a different group. So we're going to put it to a different pad page over here. So all I have to do is click the H group, because that one is really high notes in the MIDI world. So if I'm playing a synthesizer over here, listen to what these notes are. Super high notes, so I'm not going to use those, but these lower pad pages are going to be good notes that you might want to use, or maybe you want to go to group C, which is where the drums are going to start, and you can play drums with your controller. We don't want to mess with that. What we're going to do is we're going to go to group H and use that actually as control change information. We're going to set up with buttons like undo, etc. So go back over to controller editor, select all of the pads and make sure we're on group H, and you can see pad page H right here. And we're going to change those ones to gate as well, or make sure they're on gate. And then we're also going to set them to control change. That is different. That's not the way these ones are set up. And then the other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the color, because why not? It'll be really obvious when you're on the correct pads as you're switching between these different setups. So I select all of these pads. I'm going to go over to the color, and we're just going to change that to green. So now I've got green pads when I'm using the control change information, and when I go back to notes, everything looks normal. One more thing we're going to want to do to all of these pads is go over to press. And this is poly pressure, like aftertouch. We don't want aftertouch on these specific buttons. We want them to send control change information, and that's it. So we're just going to click on that and say press off. And then the other thing we're going to do is click this page right here. You can see that the next page of knobs up here actually starts to get into the same control change information that we have down here. So that's where things could start to get a little bit ugly with our control change information. We're going to set all of these pads to a totally different channel. It'll get that message from channel 16, which is very specific just for these pads. It's not going to get in the way with anything else if those other things are on channel 1. So I select all of these pads. And by the way, I'm noticing a little bug with my machine. I think it might be with my machine. It keeps resetting to one of these knobs randomly. So I have to be careful. Did you see that? Just went to CC75 on its own. I don't know why. Might be machine, might be Cubase. I think it's my machine sending out a random message. Not a big deal, as long as I'm aware of it. So I'm going to set these all to channel 16, so that now each one of these pads is transmitting CC105 on channel 16, CC101 on channel 16. All right, if there's anything else in here that I'm forgetting, we're going to come back and be able to mess around with that later anyways. And some things we will want to change slightly when we get into like the jog wheel or the ribbon controller. And then later on, we're going to be able to double click on these, rename it, and that will show up here on the screen, which is awesome, including these buttons up at the top. Let's head back over to Cubase and start messing around with our template. So it's these two buttons, the pencil and this little arrow to go back. So I click the little pencil button, and if it's resized to just one thing, all you have to do is stretch this out. So the way this part of the process works is kind of fun. We are going to be putting all of these buttons and knobs in our own little virtual layout here. So I'm going to start with buttons, because I've got these buttons up at the top. Top left button, I'm going to click it, but you'll notice that this square is pretty big and this button is kind of thin. Instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to resize this red one. This is a bit of a power tip for setting up your MIDI remote settings. Thanks, Nico. Start with our first button, and now you see the rest of the buttons are the same width, so we don't have to change them afterwards. Although it is very easy. You can even select all of your buttons at the same time and change them like this if you want it. These buttons up at the top have a bit of a gap, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of them and just move them over, and it's keeping the information all intact, but now I've got a bit of a separation between these top buttons, which is perfect. Now I'm going to do this one, I'm going to do this one, and then we get to these page buttons. And these page buttons, you'll see if I press them, nothing happens on the screen because they don't have any control change information, and they actually are used for us to manipulate these knobs and buttons up here to get more of them on our screen, which is brilliant, but we just need some kind of placeholder right here. So I'm going to go over to page 2, and I'm just going to assign something random. I could go over to my controller editor. I'm going to go to page 2. So page 2 of these buttons up top here, and with these buttons here, I'm just going to set them to channel 16. Now when I press these buttons, bunk, bunk, those specific buttons are these two on channel 16, which I will now go back and set those up to respond to channel 1. They're just dummy buttons so that it looks like my machine. We'll put the knobs right here, that'll be fine. So we click the button over on the left for knob, turn a knob, and you can see that it's really tiny. So that's a little too tiny. So now I start turning the other knobs and just go along like so. All right. And then the next thing we do is put a fader right here for our ribbon controller. So I click on fader and I touch it. And the fader goes up and down, unfortunately, but that's just the way it's going to have to be until we get Cubase gives us a side-to-side slider, which would be really nice. And then we get over to our 4D encoder, and this is where things get a little bit funky. We're going to create a bunch of buttons. We are going to go over to the controller editor first, and we're going to click on this guy here. When we push this button, we want something to happen. See how it's got a touch-sensitive thing? We want that turned off, and it is. That's great. And then we go over to the push button, and we want that to send control change information. But then we're going to go to this turn. And this is one of the only ones where things get a little bit funky because it's got this turn functionality where we can scroll left to right. So I'm going to show you how to map that. But in order to get that right, what we need to do is set it up so that the turn sends note information instead of controller information. Of course, this is a power tip from Nico, and it's going to work beautifully, but just trust me on that. 4D encoder, click on turn, change it to note. Then later on, we're going to map this out to a special command. So right in the middle, it's not going to be a fader. This is just going to be a bunch of buttons, which will be fine. We're going to turn it to button and click the button. Now I'm going to make this a really tiny button, like so. Then I'm going to click underneath that for another button, and we're going to push down. And then another button on the side, another button on the other side, and another button going up. So now we've got 4 buttons, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the push itself. Now we're going to have another button that's going to be turned to the left. So I turn it to the left just a little bit, and it pops up. I turn it to the right just a little bit, and it pops up. And we're going to assign something special to those later on. You'll see. It's very cool. So now we're going to go assign special commands to each of these buttons or knobs. And this is where things get a little crazy, a little bit hairy. So make sure you're paying close attention and writing things down. So next we open up this mapping assistant. I've made a key command for it because I'm doing this so many times. I'm going to click there and up pops this guy. So from now on, whenever I open up the mapping assistant, I'm just pressing Command Option M, which is my key command for it. So I want to assign something to this undo button. So I click it and up it pops. Up here, I can see that it's selected. I can do the same thing down here. You can click any of your buttons and you'll see them show up. And now we're going to assign a command to that button. And really, you can think of it like there are 2 different types of commands. You've really got 2 different things happening under the surface. And the key commands behave differently from these higher level functions. And the higher level functions allow us a little bit more control, a little bit more customizability. So we'll see what that looks like in a second. But let's go assign some key commands to some of these pads, because that's basically what we've got written on the front here, things like undo and redo. So if we want to put in undo on that, all I have to do is go over to this right-hand side, turn it on right there, type in undo, and there we go, edit undo. Double click on it, and we now have an undo button. If you ever want to test it out, just close the mapping assistant and then try some stuff out. So I made some cuts. I'm going to go undo. And it's working perfectly. And if we go back to our controller editor here, we can see that this button has an LED on signal for MIDI out. So basically, anytime I press that function, we get a little light up. You can set it to color mode dual, and then you can have green and orange, and then every time you press the button, it changes color. And if you wanted to do all of them like that, why not? Let's actually do that. We'll leave them on for MIDI out, and we're going to go to dual. We'll make it mint and green. And so now, when you press the button, it goes mint, green. It's very subtle. So let's go assign the redo key, open the mapping assistant. We go redo and edit redo. This is all under key commands. Again, just make sure you're clicked on it. See how right now I'm actually not even selected on the redo button. You can click it right here if you want, or you can just actually tap on it, and then you know you're on the right one too. So I click on that one, I do edit redo, double click on it, and sure enough, now we've got redo on there. Let's go up to quantize. And then we need to go to key commands and choose quantize. Click on the note or hit quantize on your machine, and then double click on this guy. Now we've got the quantize function. And we could do a few more. Let's just do a few more here, and then I'll jump to my template, which is finished. And let's do semitone up and down. So we're going to go to this one right here. And in order to do semitone up and down, you might already know that because you click on a note and you press up like this, and it moves the note up. Or you've also noticed that if you're on a track and you press up or down, it navigates up to the next track. And if you ever have a function or a key command or something that you do and you're not sure what it's called when you get to the mapping editor, all you have to do is go up to Edit, Key Commands. You should have a key command for key commands, by the way. And then now we can see that navigate down is the arrow down. And you don't even have to go over to this menu. All you have to do is click over here and go, well, do you know what? I've got some key commands I made. So I know that every time I go command up, it does a decibel up in the volume. Well, that's called key command audio increment event volume. So now I can go to the mapping assistant and assign that to any one of my buttons on my machine. In here, I want to actually use this to find out what this up arrow does. So I just press up on my keyboard. Up is called navigate up. And then here, I click on semitone up. I can go straight to key commands and then go to navigate and up. There it is right there. Double click on it. And then semitone down is navigate down. Double click on that. I've already figured out that an octave up or down, which is shift up arrow or shift down arrow, amazing key command if you didn't know that one, octave up or down is actually just called add up or add down. So let's go octave up, click on that button and go add up. Octave down, click on that, and we get add down. All right, now let's get out of here and see if this is working. Semitone up is actually just doing up and down tracks. And when you're in the MIDI editor, now you select this, semitone up. It's beautiful. And then also octave up or down. Boom. So let's go to the play button. I click the play button, and this is where things are very specific. And it has to do with key commands versus not key commands. Because if you have things that aren't key commands, that are higher level functions, they can actually send MIDI information back to your machine. And what that means is things like play button, record, those ones can stay lit every time you press play, whether you press play from the machine or not. And the only way to do that is to make sure you're not using key commands for those special things. We'll have a few of those just like that. So we want to make sure the play button lights up, so we don't want to use the start that is under key commands. Because if I go under key commands, there is a transport category under key commands that has things like play and rewind and fast forward and stuff like that. We click on the play button, we go to transport, and we go start. Double click on that. We're going to hit record, transport record, and then we're going to click the stop button, and we are going to take that all the way down to key commands and down to transport and stop. Double click on that. Now let's see what happens. I press play, and it starts. I press play again, and it actually stops. It's kind of like the space bar. Now I press play, I press stop again, it goes back to where I just started from. I press play, and I notice that the play button isn't staying lit. You see that? It's playing right now, and it isn't playing lit. If I press play in the software, nothing happens to the hardware. So in order to change that, we go back to the controller editor, I click the play button, and then I make sure that this LED is for MIDI in. And if we do that, it'll send MIDI in to our machine and tell it to play or tell it to light up. So I press play, look at that, it's lit. I press stop and it stops. I press play in the software and it lights up. Nice, hey, thanks Nico. Press record and it's not lit up. So we go back over here, go to our record button, click on it, change it for MIDI in, and then now press record, same thing, lights up. All that's beautiful. So we're going to use that functionality, this MIDI in thing, for a couple other buttons. I'll show you that in a moment. But now let's go set up the ribbon strip here. And this ribbon, CC1, that makes me a little nervous. So let's go change that to channel 16 as well. I'm going to click on that, type channel 16. But the problem is I've already assigned this to channel 1. So watch what happens when I move this. Absolutely nothing. So this one right here is now wrong. I'm going to click on fader, and I'm going to redo this because it's sending the message on channel 16 now, right here, channel 16. So now I go over to the mapping assistant, and in this one, I'm going to click on the ribbon. I am going to assign this to the AI knob, which is a new function that is beautiful. You put your mouse over top of any fader or any slider or anything like that, any parameter in Cubase, whether it's on a virtual instrument or on an effect or on your volume. And whatever you're hovered over, you can then control with this ribbon strip. It's beautiful. So I type in AI, and here is the mouse pointer value at mouse pointer. So I click on that. Now I've got my ribbon strip assigned to that, and it's working. Perfect. And if I go to some track and adjust this, of course you can see that that's working. I can go to the panning, and I'm going to show you that this is probably your best way to write automation. We'll see why in a little bit. And then we're going to go also to our 4D encoder, and we're going to start applying some controls to these buttons. So I click on the edit button, we'll go over to the mapping assistant, and these ones are very specific as well. So I am going to, first off, I'm going to press up and down to do navigate up and down, just like we did with this semitone up and down. So this will work for this, do the same thing as these. I just like that for getting around tracks and stuff like that. I click up, and I've already assigned that to this button right here. So we'll go navigate, and then we go up. And then we're going to go navigate down on this one. And then for the stop and start button, which is the press of the button is right there, we are going to type start stop. And that's under a key command. So we're going to apply that to the push button press. And then we're going to go up to the scroll wheels. This is where things get a little bit weird. So we want to scroll left, we want to scroll right. And Nico gave me a great tip on this one. It's beautiful. You're going to love this one. So we go over to transport, and we go nudge cursor left. And then we're going to spin it to the right, which is the other button right here that I assigned. And we're going to go nudge cursor right. Now watch what happens when we're working with the 4D encoder. We scroll to the left, and it's going to jump according to our adapt to zoom. If I zoom in a little bit, it gets much more precise. If I zoom way out, it gets nice and big. So your scroll wheel just works so perfectly if you assign it to those nudge key commands. Next, we've got navigate up and down, and that's working perfectly. We can actually even control notes that way as well. Beautiful. And then I can press play and stop, and it's not working. It's doing something really funky because I just remembered we probably didn't change that one in the controller editor. So right now this is set to note, and it's set to mode toggle. We want to change that to gate. That was one of the ones that didn't get selected when I drew a box around everything at the very beginning. You can see it doesn't get selected. So that was my mistake. So make sure you click on note and then change that push to gate. We already went and changed turn to note at the beginning, but now you make sure that the push is set to gate. And now we should be good to go. Let's see, play, stop, play, stop. Perfect. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my finished template for my machine so I can go and show you what I did for all the other MIDI remotes, because I feel like I've got enough in here. Okay, so let's see what I did for the left and right. To the left, I've got left navigate and right navigate. And get out of the mapping assistant anytime you want to test something, because now I can click here and I can select to the next note or chunk. I can also go to the next note. So that's going to be useful when I'm editing. What else do I have down here? On my transport controls, I love rewind and fast forward. And I do have scroll now, which is beautiful. I just showed you that one. But what I did instead of restart and erase is I've got rewind and fast forward mapped to these two buttons right here. So if I go over to my mapping assistant, I click on my rewind button, I've got rewind transport and I've got forward transport. So you're going to see that under the transport controls right here. Don't go to the key commands, because if you do that, you're going to actually lose some information down here on the bottom. This is very important. So make sure it's transport rewind and transport forward for these rewind and fast forward buttons. And then if you do that, you have to make sure you click down at the bottom where it says take over and toggle. You want it to set toggle to off. And toggle off and on is going to be a very specific message coming from this device, and Cubase is going to interpret it a different way. So if I press this button right now on fast forward and I let it go, it stops. If I press rewind, hold it down, let it go, it stops. That's exactly how I want this behavior to be. Watch what happens. Let's go forward. Let's set it to toggle on. If I set it to toggle on, you're going to kind of see the difference between what these messages are. So watch what happens. I press forward now, and it just keeps going until I press it again, which is not the behavior I want for my fast forward or rewind buttons. So if you program a button of some sort and it's not sending the message, or it's not sending the message again the way you want, just go in there and see if you can activate that toggle button. But just remember, that's not going to work on anything that is a key command. It's only going to work on things that are higher level things like play, record, click, all of that kind of stuff. Anything you'll see in these categories that aren't in the key commands category. That's basically what it boils down to. So I'm going to go back to that button, forward transport. I'm going to set toggle to off. Now let's go look at something that has toggle set to on. I'm going to click the solo button on my machine right here. I've got solo and mute already mapped. I open this up, I press the solo button, which I went to solo selected track. So this is a higher level thing, not a key command. I go to selected track, and then I see solo right here. So when I double click on that, I get this information down at the bottom. The bottom of a key command looks like this. When it's not a key command, you get a little bit more information, a little bit more possibility to change things. And that's also going to help us with the lights, as we'll see in a second. So with the solo button, I've got the toggle set to on. I can click on the solo button here, solos the selected track, I press it again, and it unsolos the track. And that's that toggle switch. So if your button is misbehaving, come back to this point of the video and make sure your toggle is set appropriately. It's going to be one or the other, depending on what kind of function you're doing. Let's look at a few more examples. Let's go to the cycle. So cycle right now I have set to follow, because that's a really important function of your transport. So I click on the follow button right here. Let's go see what I've got. Follow, activate cycle in transport. Again, transport, activate cycle. Make sure it's not from a key command, and that gives us the ability to have toggle on. Now watch what happens when I press that button. I get the cycle on, turn it off, and I get the cycle off. Now there's more we can do with this, because right now if I hit the cycle, nothing happens to my button here. I'm going to go back to controller editor, and on this button right here specifically, anytime we want information to come from Cubase to the machine to say turn a light on, all we have to do is go over to where it says LED on for that control and make sure it's changed to for MIDI in. And what that means now, instead of a light flashing whenever you press the button, now every time you do that function, a light's going to come to tell you it's on, and then a light's going to come to tell you it's off. So let's watch our cycle button now. Now we can see the follow grid button here is lighting up to tell us that our cycle is on. Again, thank you, Nico, for all of these nuggets of wisdom. It's just incredible. So we'll go to the click, same thing. Instead of tap, I'm actually just using that as the metronome, and that again is coming from transport and activate metronome click. So if I click that button, we can see transport, activate metronome click, and I've got it set to on. And then again, I just have to go over to my controller editor, make sure that one is set to for MIDI in. So now whenever I press the click, we can see that click is off, we can see the click is on. We change it here on the software, and we see it change on the machine. So nice. So I've got a few more things. You can go in and customize these buttons to anything meaningful for you. And I tried to make them all have some kind of connection to what it actually says on the machine for the most part. Not all of them, I guess, but things like tempo, I've got assigned to beat calculator. So now I can just press tempo, and I can tap in the tempo of my song. I've got the lock button. I've got that one set to snap on and off. I've got select all assigned to the select button. So you're in a MIDI editor, you just press select and it selects all. I've got duplicate assigned to the duplicate button, and that works up on the main page as well. Click duplicate, boom. In the mapping editor, duplicate is just under key commands. Variation, what did I assign to variation? Show lanes. I like this because when I'm comping, now I can look at the lanes of my track. So I press this button and we see the lanes. And if I press it again, we lose the lanes. So, and then for events, I've got this one. If I have something selected, if I have events selected here, I can just press that button and it opens up events down in the bottom here. That might not be the best one. I might change that one later. Clear, I've got a set to erase, copy, and paste. I've also got this button assigned to the chord pads. All right, what else? Mixer up at the top, and I press it again and the mixer closes. Sampling, I've got assigned to add a sampler track, because why not? Up at the top, I've got channel. I've got that set to edit channel settings on selected track. I press the channel button and there's my channel settings for my track. I press the plugin button, and just like we have in Maschine, if you are on a virtual instrument, that's going to go edit VST. That's the button I sort of associate with your instrument in Maschine, so I've just done the same thing here in Cubase. Up at the top, now this is where things get really fun. I've gone through and I've renamed these buttons to some specific things. So all you have to do is go up here and type in whatever you want. Let's type Bob. And now if I look at my Maschine, it says Bob up at the top. This button is always going to load up with your template. And you can actually have 2 pages of these buttons. So you can have very specific things that you might not remember up at the top. And here is where I'm going to go show you my other template in Maschine. This is my master. And then sure enough, you can see all of the things I've got assigned to that. So I assigned them first here in Cubase, and then I went back to my controller editor and renamed them up on the top. So I've got export audio for my entire project. I've got key commands so that the key commands pop up. I've got another button that is OK. And if I press that one, it closes any window that is open. That's a really special one that, again, Nico helped me find. So you go key commands, focus, confirm. I never would have found that one. Beautiful. That allows you to close things without going to your keyboard if you're just working on Maschine. I've got edit mode up top. So I click that button and edit mode pops off. I've got kill solo, kill mutes, these guys up top. I've got auto scroll on or off right there. And then I've got my MIDI remote mapping editor assigned right there as well. Now, if I page to the right, I can go and assign a whole bunch more buttons. And if you wanted to do that, what I would tell you to do is just go like this. Set another row of buttons up above as your other set of buttons. Why not, right? You can actually have different mapping pages here in Maschine, but this would keep things a little simpler. And then you can also have another row of 8 knobs. So why not have those kind of 2 sets of knobs right here in your Maschine template? But I'll let you guys do that on your own. We'll keep it a little simpler here. And then what did I assign my knobs to? So the knobs here, you can see I've got FQC1. The focus quick controls. These are really nice feature, and there's lots of videos on focus quick controls, but I'll just show you how I assign those. Of course, we go open, and then each one of these knobs is assigned to focus quick control 1 to 8. And then the controller editor is go over here, double click, and just rename it so that it says focus quick control. And then you could have your next row of knobs maybe set to something entirely different. Either they could be the track quick controls, which you can access on any track over here, or they could be something totally different that's important to you where you want lots of control with the knobs. I will mention one little caveat with this system with these 8 knobs, and something I noticed with any kind of endless encoder. That was on my Polyroot. I tried the endless encoder, and then I tried the fixed encoders. And the thing I'm noticing with the MIDI remote is that you're going to get some kind of glitchy automation if you are using endless encoders. And I've heard that there's a fix coming for that. So hopefully that fix comes soon and we won't have to deal with it, but I'll just show you what it looks like. Let's go to Pad Shop and see what the focus quick controls look like. I hit the quick control button, and you can see that this is active right now. So this knob is controlling filter cutoff. This one's controlling master volume right here. And you can see that it's just a little bit sketchy as I move it back and forth. And some things are worse than others, but these ones are particularly bad. Really not quite ready for prime time just yet. And if you were to try and automate that, this is what it would look like. You can see it kind of jittering back and forth. And it tries to even it out a bit, but look at those steps. That's just kind of nasty. So what I would use this for is any kind of controls where you wanted to, adjust on a synthesizer. The quick controls are still brilliant. They're still going to work. And then what you could do is once you're ready to automate something, go use the AI knob. And then we're going to go to filter cutoff. I'm going to mouse over top of filter cutoff, and we're going to use the ribbon here, which I helped you set up earlier. So watch what happens when we write in some automation with that. Of course, it's nice and smooth. Something to be aware of. So I'll put something in the description once that gets fixed. And other than that, though, this whole layout is just so beautiful. So I've got a few more things in there, like read and write automation. I've got file save. I've got project settings. So if I click this, I get the project settings. Ideas I assigned to file save new version. And I love that button, so I just press that, and all of a sudden I've got a totally different file saved. I've got the browser set to Media Bay, and if you press it again, it goes away. Automation here, I've got these two buttons for read and write automation. So if I click on this track and I press W, write automation comes on, I press it again, it goes away, I press the R, and the R goes away. And again, just in case you're trying to set those ones up, let's just double check the settings on it. So write automation, we can see that this isn't a key command. We've got that extra information on the bottom. Make sure that one is set to toggle on. And the same thing with read automation. Make sure that one is set to toggle on. And then make sure you go to those two buttons over here and set the LED for MIDI in for both of those. Why? Because now when you turn automation on for your track, you're going to see that light up. Watch this. So I press W off, on, R off. So you can see automation is reading right now just with that little LED. It's little things like that that are going to make this whole integration a whole lot more meaningful for you. So Nico, thank you so much for your help on this. I can't believe how much time you put into this for me, and it was just day after day of little quick calls that end up being 2 or 3 hour calls. So I'll go and post a link to this video in the forums, and I will potentially try and upload my templates for you there. I really think it'd be great if you could set this up for yourself, and I definitely don't have time to go on there and be tech support, and I know there are going to be a lot of questions that come out of this, but the forums are going to be great for that, and hopefully this video helps a lot of people get a whole lot more use out of their machines or other devices. And in the future, I will do some setup videos with other devices as well. This is just amazing stuff and really takes Cubase into totally different territory with their software and with how much you can integrate other pieces of hardware in your studio. And to me, that is such an important thing. The companies that are going to win in the future are those who aren't trying to be insular and make only their products work with their software. It's those companies that know, we have all sorts of companies. We love all sorts of companies. I do. And this definitely seems to be what is happening with the music world. Hopefully more companies fall in line with this, and maybe the rest of the world as well. So thanks so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button and the bell. Those subscriptions really make a big difference with the YouTube algorithm. And we'll see you in the next video.